Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Open Dome event. I'm just taking my time just to allow a few stragglers that might have gotten the link just now sorted or are just finalizing their cup of tea, as I did just a few minutes ago, to settle down and join us. So today's session is, as you can see, on sky and well-being, and we will be starting with a panel discussion and then follow on as usual with a brief overview of what's coming up in the sky. And I couldn't stop myself looking out of the window and just adding a small snippet here. You can see from just 15 minutes ago due south, where the clouds opened up a bit and you could see a beautiful moon with a Jupiter in there. Pardon my very bad image quality. That's just taking a snapshot out of a window while setting up everything up for today's event. So that gives you an idea. There's plenty ongoing outside as well, but our acting observatory support officer Dan Turner will be talking about that after the panel discussion. As per usual, we have a chat going on at the same time. So if you're listening and watching this through the YouTube channel or through the YouTube stream, then have a look on the live chat and join in. Both our observatory support officer Dan, myself, and all our panel members are on that chat and are willing to offer some advice, continue with some further discussions as well on that chat line. So do please try to use that chat. And I can see a few of you, hi Manny, hi Ian, have already used that and given us a virtual hello on that chat. So without much ado, what I will do now is hand over to my virtual self and starting off the panel discussion now for you. Welcome everyone to our monthly Open Dome event. As you can see, we've got a slightly different format. So for this month's event, I decided to set this up as a panel discussion on a really fascinating topic that's quite close to my heart, at least, on sky and well-being. So overall, stress and worries really hit us in many different forms. And I mean, COVID crisis currently has just been one example of that for all of us. And individually, each of us has sort of strived or tried to, in some way, improve our own well-being in different ways and coping mechanisms. So one of this has sort of been described by many and also in the literature in some extent, so watching the sky and feeling part of something bigger, just being able to contemplate. And that's what this event today is sort of based around. And because it's so varied in its different facets, I think this panel discussion is ideal to capture all these varied different ideas and backgrounds. So I thought having a panel to bring this all together is really rich, because else we would just have a very unified, singular point of view as we are approaching this. So doing so, what we've done, or I've decided to do, is throughout my work at Nottingham Trent Uni and in the past few months, I've encountered sort of different individuals working on this area, and you three are some of these examples as well. So for one, we've invited Jackie Patterson, a lifestyle journalist, onto the panel. Welcome, Jackie. So you've described yourself as a layman with an interest in astronomy and a fascination with how the night sky and all the unknowns of outer space can actually help ground us on Earth and put our daily worries into perspective. And the grounders is something that's quite fascinating. Will come up later as well. That led you to, as you said, research the topic in greater depth, and that's how we sort of got in contact, because you contacted me for some responses on that as well. And I thought I'll revisit that favor and try to get you to give us some comments. Yeah. So you encountered that and were quite interested in speaking to astronomers, psychologists, mindfulness teachers. So you come up with this rich background without having a specialist knowledge actually in there, which is really helpful, I think. Yes. We've also invited Jacqueline Woolley. So hi, Jackie, Pauline Woolley. Yes. So you've described yourself as an artist who uses the night sky to create visual works using photography and video. And some of the guests to our Open Dome event have seen some of your works as well in our Writing Skyscape exhibition as well. You describe yourself as using the night sky as a tool for solace and well-being, interest in the relationship and perception of the night sky, and how we see in the night sky and the countryside the beauty, even in areas which are urban skies and full of light pollution as well. So really challenging, actually real local places that everyone has sort of access to as well. That will be really fascinating. You can give us that view of what somebody who's listening to this switches off the computer and can go into the back garden and see as well. Thank you for joining us. So, and finally, we've got Danny Hendry. Thanks for coming along. We've had some communications because you're...
I'm the student support advisor for School of Science and Technology here at NTU. Been working at NTU now for 4 years, but before that I obviously had a student support function in FE. And obviously my interest...
Really interesting. I mean, through that, we've sort of caught up here or there when we were trying to assist some of the students. And you mentioned that recent events had already prompted many people to develop sort of new coping mechanisms. That's what we mentioned for this event as well. And that's good to see how that rings true for you as well. And that's included some of these interests in the natural world and the surroundings. And your interest in this topic is focused around an interest in the sky and all that is in it, and how it can contribute to well-being and perhaps even become sort of one of these, as you described it, self-care non-negotiables for many. So something that is essential and that we can't live without. So that's our panel, quite rich. Some of you will hopefully know my background as a cultural astronomer as well, and interested in watching the sky. But I'm trying to be very impartial and just lead this as a panel host here. So maybe I'll kickstart off our discussion by maybe briefly collecting some reactions from the panel, giving you some opportunities to just make a statement or comment upon the following. So I've heard many saying the night is dark. If I step outside, I might see some stars or the moon, but so what? These things are so far away and really have nothing to do with my life here and now and my problems. So better close the door and focus on what's actually down here. So that's the statement. I'll throw that out to you. Danny, do you want to maybe comment?
Yeah, I mean, I can certainly comment. Obviously, I'm coming from a student support perspective, so many of the perspectives I bring are around student support and maybe looking at HE, but hopefully that can be kind of widened to the general population that we can discuss some of these themes. I guess for me, this kind of statement, this non-relevance that actually this is outside and it has nothing to do with me, I think it brings it back to the point of being part of something bigger. Often we have this sense of self, and we can become quite wrapped up in our own kind of world, to a point where, you know, I have students that may stay in their room for weeks on end because of their anxiety or their mood. So often students might have that perspective, but I think it's again having that kind of look at the bigger picture and realizing that we're part of something kind of far bigger. And just changing your perspective on that, I think it is something which is quite pertinent to me and can have a positive impact on a student's mentality. Okay, that's sort of from a student support services point of view. If we move on to maybe Jackie, and what do you think about that then?
Well, I actually think maybe that is part of the problem. That kind of attitude is what people have, especially with lockdown, when people have been sort of confined to home and they've been all the kind of external entertainments to being taken away. So they've had to kind of focus on what they have here and now. And a lot of people have rediscovered this kind of affinity with nature, or this an interest in nature. That original attitude, I think, is part of the problem, because people have lost that relationship with nature that they used to have, even when I was growing up as a kid, so much more so than now. So yeah, I think lockdown has reminded people what's on their doorstep, and how nature can actually affect their daily lives, whereas they may have thought it had no place in their life. They've come to realise now just in fact how vital it is and the benefits they can get from it. So it's like people are rediscovering what they can get just from being in nature, or just from being aware of nature and just noticing nature around them, and just breaking out of these sort of self-absorbed little cosseted lives that they had. And I think lockdown has been massive for doing that for people.
Brilliant. I think that's a really good point where we can bring in Pauline, where you might have some comments about how you actually respond to that kind of statement.
For me, I'm the person that steps outside and goes and looks up. I'm the person that notices, the changing of the seasons and what's happening in the sky. But for me, that comes from a deeper level, from having a childhood where I had that experience and I was in a family that's what we did. However, I've lived in the city now for over 25 years, so I can't really say that, I'm a country girl anymore. I live in the city. But certainly during lockdown, I think I went outside more than I did, previously, because I didn't want to stay inside and watch, box sets of Netflix and stuff like that. I wanted to kind of use this time to go outside and to look up in the night sky, or to watch spring arrive. But I'm lucky because I have a garden. So there's also an awareness of people that don't have the space to go outside and look up. I've got friends who lived in London that, have a flat and don't have the space to go out. So it's kind of like being aware that, yes, we can go and do that, but at the same time, there's people that can't. So it's being able to show people ways in which they can go out and just observe without needing access to really dark skies, or a massive space or garden.
Thanks for that, Pauline. So in these times, we sort of realized that it's really challenging. You picked up on some of these points, but I mean, not only challenging that you struggle sort of from having this kind of, you are alone, given lockdown in certain situations, you can't get out, as you were saying, as much as you wanted to. Also the problem of being alone, missing family, you can't see your family as often as you might do. But I mean, also experiencing losses in the wider or closer family has come to many of us, either directly, or we know some people in our wider circle of friends as well that have encountered that. And then the other level is as well that there's this imminent and quite visual danger to us. I mean, at some point it was every day you switch on the TV, there was a broadcast from the Prime Minister talking about the updates and what was happening. So an impending danger personally for us as well, not only in the wider or closer circle of friends around there. So at that point, how does that have an emotional impact on you guys? How does that maybe in a way change your perception of the night sky now in these conditions compared to as it was beforehand?
Can I answer first?
Yeah, go ahead, Jackie.
Well, for me, my family are all back home in New Zealand. So obviously, as well as being afraid for my own family and myself here, I also had the added worry of trying to worry about family, literally as far away as you can possibly get without coming back. And that, not being able to kind of check in with them, or I mean, I know that obviously we couldn't go and see people anyway, but not being able to check in with them, not being in the same hemisphere as them or the same time zone as them, that kind of added to the stress for me. But one thing I found, and it probably sounds a bit hokey, but I went out one night and just looked up, and it was a really dark night, and the sky was just so lit up by stars, and it kind of just reminded me that although I'm so far away from them, we are literally under the same set of stars. And that was quite, used the word grounding before, and it was a really grounding kind of feeling. And it was also, to me, it was quite unifying. It made me feel like again, it sounds so cheesy, but it made me feel like the whole world was in this together, and although it was a very sort of alienating time, in actual fact we were all together on this, and it made me just feel closer to humankind. Yeah, which sounds so, it does sound a bit cheesy, but it really did. It really made me kind of understand or remember that humanity has been here for a long time, but the everything else has been here for so much longer, and they've survived that, and we will get through this. And it was just really reassuring. And again, like I said, it made me kind of feel an attachment to my family, albeit so far away. It made me kind of realise that yes, we all just are still part of this one, comparatively small planet whizzing around in space. So it made me feel better, and I can't exactly explain why. It just made me feel more settled. My anxiety dropped down, and that's why after that I took my girls out, and every night we would go out and we would look up at the stars, and I would say those are the stars that you'd see from New Zealand. These are the stars we're seeing now, and it just kind of tied everything up nicely and distracted us. And
before we get too much into that aspect, I think, which we'll pick up in a minute, Danny, can I just pick up on some of the things we talked about, emotions that sort of have come up in these times? We talked about stress levels, anxiety. How would you, in your from your professional background, describe the different emotions, the level of stress or problems and challenges?
I think this has affected everybody, not just those with pre-existing mental health concerns. I mean, I think the key thing for me is, we all develop coping strategies, whether we know about them or not, and I think actually since March, we've really missed a lot of those coping strategies that maybe we took for granted or didn't know were central to the maintenance of our own well-being. So I think a lot of people and a lot of the students that I support, those coping strategies that they used to have, like going to the gym, going for coffee, all of those innocuous things that we may have taken for granted, suddenly having those removed and having no routine, even doing this, coming online and delivering virtually, that routine of getting up, getting clothes on, going to shower, is all of that routine that we've built up over that time's gone. And I think it comes down to uncertainty. Uncertainty is the source of all anxiety. And I guess my interest in this is people have, during this period since March, started to develop those new routines, and more than ever have developed that interest in the natural world. And I guess where I'm really interested is, I think most people would look at the daytime, and you've heard stories of people talking about birdsong that they can hear for the first time, getting back in touch with nature and plants. But I think people haven't been discussing, actually, that's just half of the picture here, and perhaps this is something that we could really tap into as another way of getting back in touch with nature, and using that as I said, a self-care non-negotiable, something which is absolutely central to the maintenance of our well-being, and having that. And the fact is, it's so accessible. It's not like you have to pay a subscription. It is literally, it's outside your window. So for me, it's quite an exciting opportunity to really develop how, there are apps, there are stargazing and meditation apps, but it's how we can maybe develop this so that more people can benefit from undoubtedly what others are already benefit or have benefited from in the past.
Now, Pauline, what's your view on that?
All of it, really. Same as, Jackie, really. My family live 2 hours away. Okay, they don't live in New Zealand, but they live 2 hours away. So during lockdown, I didn't get to see them for the 12 weeks. And that was difficult, but I'd phone my mum every evening, and it got to the point where we were having conversations about the night sky. So I would say to her, look out the window tonight, you'll see the moon. Or she'll phone me and say, couldn't sleep last night, the moon was really bright. And it was really good, because again, it felt like we were together. Do you know what I mean? That we are under one sky, and we've had this forever, and we're sharing something. And And by going out and just noticing things, it does bring your anxiety down. The more you notice, the calmer you become. It widens your perspective. It widens that narrowing. And when we're being bombarded constantly with grim news every day, being able just to go out and just to take a breath and just to notice is really helpful.
And I think as well, just from a perspective and some of the themes that I see, as we get into the winter months and the night draws in, at 4 o'clock, that's where we see a lot more presentations of low mood, depression, those associated presentations. So again, this seems like another untapped resource that maybe we can look to develop. And if there are any keen researchers out there, maybe a research theme moving forward.
Now, we've had a comment from one of our viewers, one of our participants, John Isherwood from Arnold U3A Astronomy Group. So he's described the following: astronomy gives us a grounding and humility to face daily life, the wonder at our unique intelligence and privilege, humbleness felt against the magnitude of space, joy observing at the end of the day, peace, solitude, and feeling of discovery, mindfulness and well-being guaranteed. So that's just a comment. I would love to follow up different points preparing for this, and you've already mentioned this throughout. Each and every one of you has sort of commented upon sky as a way to ground oneself, reaffirm uniqueness, seeing that the sky unites us or is something unifying for all of us. Could you try to express what this groundedness, what that uniqueness, what that unity is sort of where that's coming from? Maybe Jackie, if you want to start us off with that.
I think for me personally, I think it's in your day-to-day life, you get so kind of caught up in your daily bits and pieces, don't you? The small parts of your own life, and it's very easy to get caught on that spinning rat wheel. I think when you look when you go outside and you look at the sky, it forces you to think out of your own little bubble of your life, and it forces you to kind of remember that not only is there a world out there, but there's galaxies and in the universe and galaxies out there, and there's just an infinite amount of space that we know barely anything about. And I think that really, it's overwhelming, but it's overwhelming in one of those kind of wondrous, awesome ways. And I think that, for me, puts me back in my place. Like, it makes me think, oh God, why am I getting so obsessed about my grocery delivery not arriving when this amazing everything out there has existed for millions and millions and millions and millions and billions of years, like, and I'm worried about something getting missed off my shopping list. Like, it makes me just kind of snap myself out of things and think, don't be so ridiculous. Like, there's so much more to everything than these little things that you're getting caught up with.
Yeah. And you were saying there's so much out there that you don't know about, and there's so much things where you're uncertain about where they're coming from and things. That's interesting, because that's sort of, you're aware of uncertainties. Yes. But rather than Danny was saying certain all this uncertain times of uncertainty causing the anxiety, this is exactly the flip coin. All these uncertainties somehow cause a reduction of anxiety.
Yeah, which I find strange as well, because I have thought about that, and I thought it's kind of it is funny how that works in that way. But I think whereas space sometimes can feel very overwhelming because you just the complexities of it and the vastness of it. It can feel a bit kind of like, when your mind gets twisted into knots and you have to stop thinking about it because it just gets too much. I think in this case, because we don't know about it, and I mean, I'm personally never going to know about all the mysteries of space, so you just give yourself over to it. You don't try and explain it. You don't try and understand it. You just accept it for what it is, and you accept the fact that you don't know anything about it. And I think there's
if I let Danny follow up on that.
So yeah, for me, it's about that perspective and putting things back in perspective. We all live lives that are full of sound and fury, but signify nothing. And I think it is about that perspective. You can probably tell me better than I know, Dan, but in terms of, from the start of the universe to the end of the universe, the time that life is possible is like a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a billionth of a percent. So, we're living that. And actually just knowing that we are the creation of something which is actually incredible. It's almost impossible that we are here, that I'm talking to you today. And the fact, knowing that and understanding that, and I don't think the majority of people would necessarily understand that and truly feel that. And just knowing that, you learn to appreciate the beautiful sunset we've had this evening, that your food tastes better. You learn to appreciate that we're part of something bigger, and that sense of self suddenly dissipates. And those not trivial worries, because for a lot of people, I don't want to trivialize anxiety or trivialize their worries, but it just allows me, and it allows other people to maybe put those back into perspective, that actually we are part of something bigger and we are incredibly unique. And like the quote that John so eloquently put, we are privileged to be exactly where we are and almost be the conscience of the universe. So I know it sounds huge when you think of it like that, and trying to get your head around some of these themes like an infinite infinity, it kind of blows your head sometimes.
It's good that you mentioned the sun, observing the sunset, for example. So we're not only talking about the stars, because I think, Pauline, you've got some interesting aspects there that you can put as well, because you've done some artwork that does exactly that.
Yeah,
I can even see if it's behind you.
I think it might be over there. So I am interested in long exposures of the sun, so pinhole photography, etc. But I used it as a tool of solace when my dad was dying. So basically, in the 8 months that he was alive, I was going back and to from Nottingham to Cheshire every weekend, sometimes twice a week, and I'd take my cameras with me. And so I'd set up a camera here in my own garden and a camera in my childhood garden. And over the course of the time that his last few months, I kind of then built up these images, which was a unique way of marking time. And for me, that really kind of helped, because this was happening at my childhood home garden, and it was happening here in my adult home garden. And it helped to kind of sort of solidify the fact that, we're living in a rhythm. We're here for a moment and then we're gone. Mm-hmm. And being able to kind of be aware of that really sort of doesn't take away the pain and the grief at all, and it doesn't trivialize the pain and grief and anxiety that people go through, but it's a tool to mark something, a fleeting passing of time. So as an artist, I'm very much interested in sort of the rhythms and cycles of life. And
so what's your preferred way of observing the sky then? Is there a change between pre-COVID and the current times?
Well, COVID times, I've had more time to go out and observe, which has been.
It sounds like it's photography for you, how you would be observing.
Yeah, I mean, I would take photographs, but I would also sit and watch. And what was really interesting is that during lockdown, I set a challenge to the people that I work with. I said, go outside and take a picture of the sky, the same time every day in the same place, as a moment just to go out and just to take notice and to document it. And people really enjoyed that. They were like, gosh, that's it. It was as though it was something totally new. But it's not. It's just there all the time. You just need to just go out, and even if it's just 5 minutes in your day where you notice something.
Thanks for that. I think, Pauline, that's good that Pauline raised that, because I think, Jackie, you have something quite similar that you were starting already to explain a while back, sort of your preferred way, or one of the ways you engage with the sky.
Well, when I went out and just, well, first of all, just looked at it. Like,
yeah, well, that's the main thing. Yes.
But yeah, it was funny because you go out there, went out there and looked and just thought, God, why have I not done this in ages? Why have I forgotten to just go out and marvel at the sky? It was kind of just like a weird light bulb.
So you just did that naked eye, or
yeah? Why do I not do this more often? And then my daughters are of an age now where they can really understand that or get into that more. So that's why I kind of dragged them out and made them look at the sky as well. But they thought it was fantastic as well. But then we also had one of the stargazing apps that you can just put on your phone. So we used that, and we ran upstairs and we looked out the window and we looked at one really bright. Well, at the time we actually thought it was a light, and then we found used the app to discover it was actually a planet. It wasn't a star that we thought it was, and it was all just very kind of wondrous and exciting. And then that became our thing every evening. We would go every evening upstairs and we would use this app to kind of just look around the night skies. But I think why it had such an effect during lockdown is because when you kind of, because you cut off, like I said before, you cut off from all these other distractions, and also we were stuck in these four walls, and it allowed us to kind of go beyond our four walls, and it allowed us to literally go through the solar system, or go through go through our galaxy and through all the planets and find all the planets. And it was literally like traveling from the safety of our home, looking out our window during lockdown. And I think it's just that being locked, I don't know if it would have had that same impact if it hadn't been the circumstances of lockdown. So in a strange way, I'm kind of grateful to that experience, because that it just reminded me of how amazing and awesome it is out there if you just look. And I don't think I would have done that otherwise.
Danny, how did you feel about then, or how did you engage with the sky then beforehand, maybe now?
So my preferred ways of observing and watching the sky is in my back garden with a nice glass of red wine. But I think for me, I really have vivid memories and images of. I spent a lot of time up in Northumberland over the summer, and the sky up there when it's dark, I've never known darkness like it, just because there is there's hardly any natural light. And for anybody that knows Northumberland, I was in a place just near to Bamborough on the coast, and the sky is it literally, when you look up, it takes your breath away. It's just incredible, and you're kind of awestruck just looking at that. So when we are up there, when I'm in Nottingham, I don't, it's something that I don't do, whether that is because of the light pollution we have in Nottingham, or it's just not something that's in the forefront of my mind. But when I am away, and generally I'm quite calm because I'm on my holiday when I'm up in Northumberland, I have family up there, it's certainly a highlight of being up there. There's some stunning scenery in Northumberland, but the sky is probably the most underrated, and that goes for kind of pre-COVID and now.
Maybe something I'll throw to all of you, because I guess it's going to be more challenging for some of you, is the question from one of our participants, Sam Boot. He says the viewing of which type of celestial object gives the most satisfaction and well-being.
The moon.
The moon.
So now I'll do the teacher question. I'll say why. Why do you think the moon, for you personally, gives you more satisfaction?
For me, it's because of the phases, the fact that it changes during the cycle of a month. And I do have binoculars, and I do have a telescope, and naked eye viewing is fantastic, but also if you get the opportunity to look at the moon through a telescope, it's just mind-blowing.
I can see a sort of nodding from you, Jackie, as well. Is that the same for you?
Yeah, it's got to be the moon, isn't it? You can't beat the moon. I think also with the moon, it's not just the beauty of it. It's it's the fact that you can look up there and you can know that men have stood on that surface, and you can kind of imagine the historical aspect and the science aspect and just the pure aesthetic beauty of it, and the impact it has on the earth and the tides and all of that stuff. It's just so much to think about with it. And of course, it's forefront in all your children's kind of nighttime stories and fairy tales. So it's reminiscent, it's nostalgic from childhood. It's all that kind of like warm fuzziness wrapped up, isn't it? But I must say also a close second, coming from New Zealand, is looking up on a dark night and just the Milky Way is unbelievable. Just literally.
So you're saying coming from New Zealand, is that because of the dark skies, or is there anything else why you think it's more impressive?
I guess, yes. Well, also when I was living in New Zealand, I've been away for a long time, but back then, I mean, I'm talking about growing up in the 70s and 80s, you know, we didn't have as much light pollution as you have now. And New Zealand also being a bit more kind of less built up, so you've got more rural areas. And I just remember as a kid, just these inky black skies were everywhere, and just the stars, like I said, the Milky Way shining up against them. You just stand there staring till your neck hurt. It was just so beautiful, you couldn't tear your eyes away. So I always remember that. I always remember that with kind of fondness of just sort of growing up, and my first awareness of space as well.
Let's throw that over to Danny. I mean, you mentioned Northumberland as well, but wider field, we heard about the moon, we heard about the Milky Way. Is there a celestial object or something in the sky that you find most pleasure in viewing?
Well, that said, the Northumberland skies are literally, I'm in awe. You literally get a stiff neck looking at them, and you lose track of time, because it's different every day, and literally you see shooting stars, and you know, when you sat there with your niece and nephew, they think it's absolutely incredible. It's otherworldly, which is exactly what it is. I think with the moon, obviously, that's something which is written into our culture. You know, Shakespeare had such an affinity to the moon and associating so many things with the moon. I think growing up with that, you already have that cultural associations that you bring to the moon. So it's not just your own perceptions, but also those perceptions that are kind of that you grow up with. You know, the melancholic nature of the moon. So yeah, the moon would be the obvious choice there. But as I say, there's nothing that I've seen that could beat that night sky in Northumberland. And you know, with COVID, there's so many nasty things about this horrific pandemic, but perhaps one of the positive things is that we don't have as much traffic in the sky. We don't have as much of that kind of pollution, and maybe that's something we shouldn't lose moving forward.
Now, having heard all your different views on how you engage with the sky, the kind of emotional contact and benefits that has had, maybe staying with you, Danny, do you want to maybe give us an idea if there's some kind of, I've described it as a dummy's guide to sky mindfulness. So is there some do-it-yourself recipe, some things that you would say, try to do these things and you will be able to benefit from that in the best way?
Yeah, I mean, the beauty of things like mindfulness, you know, we attribute these names like mindfulness and meditation, and I think sometimes it can put people off. The beauty of these things, you know, we can all do this. It's all accessible. And I think the key is it's to find that sense of just being in the present and experiencing. This is all mindfulness essentially is being in the present and just experiencing what's in front of you. And those kinds of thoughts or emotions that you know we may have been tied up with, you can just start to feel those kind of melting away. But for anyone, you know, at NTU, for example, we offer mindfulness walks to our students. So particularly around busy times of the year, it might be exam season. Or we certainly used to offer these mindfulness walks where students would walk around the surroundings at the city site or the Clifton site. You know, they would feel the temperature on their skin. They would feel the texture of certain things, of bark on the branches, and it just resets you to be back into the present. So, you know, we can certainly look to see how you could how that would transfer to the sky. You know, taking the time to go outside, it's going to be cold, so you're going to feel that coldness. You know, focusing on the different stars, just concentrating on breathing and looking at the stars. And if you do that, you do enter into that state of like meditative state where time just seems to pass by, and the only thing that you're thinking about are the things that you can observe.
That might be a point, Pauline, if you want to maybe chip in there and maybe give us your view of your Dummies Guide of how you can engage in this kind of sky mindfulness.
Well, I would get an app on your phone, and like Jackie said, just go through, certain times of the year, certain times of the evening, have a look at what's in the night sky, and then just go out and look up and see whether you can, see those things. As someone who never really used to like winter, who would, experience sad, basically, I found that by engaging in noticing the night sky has helped me get over sort of the winter. Winter was quite a glum and depressive period of time for me, and having this now that I can dip in and out of, more dipping in, I have to say, more than ever now. It's just that awareness again. So even if you've just got even if you're just coming home from, if you are going out to work, coming home in the evening, look up. Even if it's a city sky, just look up and just take notice, and find out when the moon is rising and go out and have a look at the moon. Just simple things. It doesn't have to be, learning all the astronomical stuff. Just take notice. And if you've got a camera, go and take some photographs as well, because that's a really great way of being mindful.
I'll bring Jackie into this now as well. So, I mean, you've got your own view, but you've also had the opportunity in the weeks beforehand to discuss this with many different people and practitioners as well of mindfulness as well. So is there a way in which you can give us 5 tips how to become sky or do sky mindfulness when we come back from home now that it's getting darker?
Yeah, well, I actually, for the feature I researched, I did like a little list of things, that literally a dummy's guide to stargazing. I think the first point was, like, you don't need any fancy equipment. You don't need to know, you don't even need to know what you're looking at necessarily. You can just lie there and just go, ooh, that's pretty. Or you can take it further and figure out what you're looking at, or you can get telescope, you can get at any sort of point, you can dip in as deep as you want to. But, and it's just so simple, and it's what I loved about it is the fact that anyone can do it anywhere. I mean, in some places it's easier, but you can do it in city locations. The tips that I was given and sort of compiled together was to try and get as high up as you can, so you're getting above as much of the light pollution as you can, to switch off any of the lights that you can control yourself. You don't even have to be outside. They were said, get yourself under a big, if you've got like a, if you're lucky enough to live in a penthouse and you've got a skylight, just lie under the skylight and look out up at the sky, look out of a big window, go to the top of a hill, just get as high as you can. And basically the message I got was like, wherever you are, you can see something. And they also said, just sit yourself down, make sure you're nice and warm, because that can be distracting if you're worried about the cold, and just sit back and just stare and just find something to look at and just concentrate on that. And then a lot of people said to me, then other things you become aware of other things over that time. And you know what, a really handy thing that I found out too, and I can't remember the actual medical name for it, but if you're trying to look at something in the sky, don't look straight at it, look just to the side of it, because there's some kind of medical thing with your eyesight, something about the core of your eye, that if you look directly at it, your eye doesn't process the information. So the trick is to look just to one side of it, and then bizarrely you'll be able to see it more clearly. But yeah, obviously if you can get somewhere darker, that is the optimum kind of viewing circumstances. But like I said, the takeaway that I got was that you can do it anywhere, anytime. Go out your back garden, go to a park, go to a reserve, go to the top of your apartment building. You can see something from anywhere. unless it's cloudy, of course. But then, even then, I was told by this amazing mindfulness coach who used to work in astronomy research, and he said, look, if you go out and it's a cloudy day, don't get sort of wound up by the fact that you can't see the stars. You wanted to see the stars. He said, lie back, look at the clouds, watch the clouds moving, be mindful about that, absorb that, and then just see the beauty of the clouds. And then the clouds might part and you might see the stars peek through, and that becomes like a beautiful vista. So don't ever be disappointed by what you see or don't see.
Can I bring in one question from our audience? So one of our participants, Jenny Woodford, has asked, can this sky mindfulness be linked to forest bathing? So I'll try my non-existent Japanese. Shinrin yoku, as it's called, being calm and quiet amongst the trees, observing nature around you whilst breathing deeply. That's something that she could recall to the topic. Now, you've mentioned some things, and I know in the discussions pre our meeting, Jack, you mentioned already aspects of stargazing, meditation, which possibly you were referring to here as well, which is really fascinating because it's got things to do with Buddhist teaching that they call non-conceptual awareness. So if I try to summarize what that means, is then in a sense, when you are looking up at, let's say, the constellations, rather than saying, oh, this is the plough, that's where you're having the concept of the plough and seeing actually the concept of the plough, not the star. So actually what you then have to see is, let's forget about that, and you're seeing these dots, and they'll always appear different in different ways. So that's one thing that now, does that match? Is that something that you found resonated in what you've sort of given us there as tips for engaging with the sky, this kind of non-conceptual awareness?
I think one of the things that I kind of really came away with was the fact that to every individual person, it is a different thing, and every single person is going to take something different from it. And they're going to, like you said, they're going to see something different in it. They're going to take something different away from it. And none of there's no wrong way of looking at the stars, is there? Or looking at the sky, looking at a sunset. There's no wrong way of doing it. There's no wrong thing to see in it. Whatever you see, whatever enjoyment you get from it is perfect. That's you should never kind of go out there saying, I want to see I know people with constellations think, well, I can't see. How's that a plough? And they get so obsessed with trying to see the pictures, they forget to look at just the beauty of it. So I think almost in a way, don't go expecting anything. Just go and just be, which is the essence of mindfulness, isn't it? Just go and be, and just let it all unfold to you as it does to you as an individual.
Danny, is that what you do as well for our students in the mindfulness walk, in this kind of thing where you tap into this non-conceptual awareness that we're just seeing in stargazing meditation?
Yeah, so particularly around times of anxiety, we run these events around exam times and things like that, and it just allows to focus on the world around you, as opposed to your own tangled thoughts, and by doing that, your bodies tend to relax, your mind becomes quieter, and it's harder to get tangled up in those thoughts. So it just resets those emotions in many ways. And in terms of the links to Buddhism, I've heard of caves that are just open, so you can only see the sky. And I think there's a really good artist called James Turrell. If you want to Google him, James Turrell Sky Space, and he's developed art installations where you can only view up and look at the sky. So I think that's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I'm trying to be completely neutral here, so I won't mention anything about that because we've worked on that. Maybe I'll hand over to Pauline to maybe comment on that as well. But before you get too maybe focused only on that, there's also one aspect I want to follow up as well from there. But Pauline, if you want to tell us maybe a little bit more about this James Turrell chap and viewing only the sky, and how that might be something that assists this this kind of viewing, this kind of non-conceptual awareness.
Yeah, I mean, his installations are very much kind of field-based. So there's one at the Yorkshire Sculpture Park, and there's one up in near Kilda Observatory in Northumberland, the Deer Hut, which, again, in the summer, I don't know whether you, Danny, you saw it when you were up there, but we went and had a little look. But he just manages to kind of get your focus into a smaller space. So you're sitting in these kind of chambers that are almost like, prehistoric caves in a way, and it gives you a slice of the sky for you just to sit and just be still and to look up. And again, it's like looking out of a window. We said about, the sky is everywhere. So it's, he has these installations in fantastic locations, but, you could almost imagine being in your loft with a Velux window, looking out onto a city sky.
Okay, so much to that. But what I also wanted to pick up on, which is quite interesting, is we were talking about how we would engage with the sky, and I picked up from definitely from Jackie and from you, Pauline, that you use apps and sort of augmented reality and tools to assist you in this. But if we delve into the kind of ideas of this non-conceptual awareness, is actually releasing yourself from seeing that is the plough, or that is the moon in this phase, or this is a cluster of stars that is that old. So actually, this is an interesting counterpoint where that says it's actually important to completely forget about what that is and live in the moment, in the present, and see what that is, compared to your experience where you say I'm being provocative, that was key. Without that, it would not have worked, that experience.
Can I interject? I think it's there's two different things here. One is around mindfulness and trying to quieten your mind from, say, an acute event which might be happening. I think the other is not a hobby, but having that self-care non-negotiable, which is something that you do, much like music is a self-care non-negotiable. It's something that you learn and you learn to develop. So I think the two are very different things for very, very different purposes, but both can still have that positive impact, both on a short-term basis in terms of mindfulness, in relaxing the body and relaxing the mind and quieting the mind, but as well as taking that forward with things like apps and learning the sky and setting aside, it could be an hour each week where you learn to develop and learn those new skills. Is that sense of a self-care non-negotiable, which again is crucial to the maintenance of our well-being.
Because I think if I recall what I read in the background from forest bathing, where it's very clearly said we leave all technology away. You go in there and forget all of that, phones off, no computers, no nothing, no smartwatches, and you're just there, you're just in the moment, which is quite counter to some of the experience where you would say, you've seen something, out comes the app, and you would try to understand what that is, which brought a lot of excitement, a lot of unknown and calmingness and things, but it's quite counterproductive to that. But actually, it's interesting that you're saying that, Henry, Dan, that it's actually two different things, that it's two different ways. So that might be something where your mind gets into that and you go deeper, or you just put that to one side to experience that calming effect, if that's right.
Well, I'm only speaking from my own meandering experience, but I think they are two different things. I don't think you could be mindful. You could practice mindfulness every night, but for me and for a lot of our students, it's more of a coping strategy for acute stress, whereas their interests and those self-care non-negotiables. If you're learning to play a musical instrument, you learn with apps and you learn everything that you can to have that, but that's still a source of maintaining your well-being, having that something else which is apart from your busy life, which you can completely devote your mind to and quieten everything else. So I think both, they're not mutually exclusive to each other, but I think how you use them are two very different things.
Okay, we've got another question from the audience, actually from one of our observatory support officers. So Daniel Turner has asked a question to the panel in general. I just want to get a few short responses to that. What do you think are the possible impacts of actually diminished views of the night sky or the day sky due to, for example, artificial horizons? We might think about townscapes, light pollution, which has come up many times, human traffic in the sky as well. Danny picked up on some of that. So very briefly, Jackie, what do you think are the possible impacts of that?
I think there can actually be beauty in things like cityscapes, a different kind of beauty. I think it'd be really sad if we lost. I mean, I don't think it would actually happen. I think people would work very hard to stop it from happening. But if there was ever a case that all the there's the dark sky parks and reserves and that kind of thing, if that was ever to not be followed up on and put into place, that would be devastating for humankind. I mean, I think, humans have never not known the night sky or the sky in general. So to take it away from humankind, I mean, who knows what kind of effect that would have? I can't even imagine. I mean, it's hard, impossible to know, but we've never not had it. It's part of us. It's part of our evolution. It's part of how we've evolved socially. It's part of how we've evolved scientifically, as we're talking about tonight, in a well-being sense. So I think it would be devastating if we didn't have access to that for some reason. And I also, in my research, I was quite sort of horrified to find out how much space junk there is up there now, and how much has been introduced in just the last, 30 or 40 years. And I think that is a massive, massive, massive issue that's going to have to be addressed by our generation and the next generation if we don't want to look up in the night sky and just see, orbiting junk rather than stars and constellations and what should actually be there. That worries me. That concerns me.
So if I throw that over to Pauline, so what impacts do you think the diminished views of the night sky would have then?
I think it's to do with our health as well. I mean, light pollution has such an effect on our circadian rhythms. I mean, it's scientifically, there's research taking place now that it's having such an impact on our mental health. Living in the city myself, I get annoyed by the street lights, I have to say. I find it challenging to go out and look at the night sky under such conditions, but it is still possible. And it's having such a wide effect on our wildlife as well. I think it's such a shame that a lot of people and a lot of young people have never seen the Milky Way. It's a gem, and I think that's really something that we need to be, working with city councils and politicians with, not to get rid of city light completely, because that's not going to happen, but be more kind of mindful of where we put it and what kind of lighting there is.
And Danny, what's your views on the possible impact of a diminished view of the night sky?
Yeah, I don't think it's a possible impact. I think it already is here, isn't it? We already have diminished views of the night sky, and there will be millions of people living in towns and cities that have never had the pleasure like I have of seeing and being awestruck by something, they just don't know that's there. So I think protecting the night sky and having, just like we have designated areas of natural beauty, I think it's important that we protect clear skies so that they are accessible to other people and have them really well defined so people can go. It might be that they have to get in the car to go and view these stunning sites, but it's something that's absolutely worth not only protecting, but I would say making better than the current situation. Certainly we can't have anything worse than what we've got at the moment. It's certainly something which should be made better and protected for future generations.
Okay. Trying to draw this to an end and get some closing statements maybe. Has the COVID crisis changed our way of seeing the sky, and are there any lessons we can learn from that for the future? So I'll throw that over to Jackie. What do you think?
Yeah, I think it absolutely has. I think, as I was mentioning earlier, the fact that we've all had to kind of pull ourselves back and concentrate on a sort of a smaller thing in front of us, and we haven't had all these outside distractions of work and entertainment and social life and sporting events and all that. It's forced us to rediscover nature as a whole. You mentioned the bird song earlier. I mean, the number of people I had sort of popping up on my social media, etc., going, "My God, have the birds always been this loud? Like I've never heard it like this before." And it's just it's crazy to me. It's like nature had this chance to reclaim its place on Earth for a short window of time, and it was so nice. And it would never have happened. It would never have happened without COVID and lockdown. And it's a really weird, and obviously I don't want to sort of say it was a good thing at all, because obviously it's not, it's a scary, horrible thing. But there are aspects of it that have been so good for humankind. And one of them has been this reset button that's been pressed, and also this awareness people have now, or this rediscovery, should I say, that people have now of just nature, full stop. Like, we forgot about nature, which, if you think about it, is crazy. But so it's given us this chance of a do-over, and I really hope we don't mess it up again.
Okay, Pauline, what's your comment then on there? So what's your view on, has that changed our view on the COVID crisis, and what's the lesson we can learn from this?
I think the lesson to learn is to go out and continue what we were doing during lockdown, you know, to go out and to take notice, and to, you know, not slip back into the old ways, which, you know, time will tell to see whether that actually does happen. But, you know, re-engage with the outside. Even if it's, you know, a small space, even if it's, you know, a small backyard, or, you know, your local park, or, you know, you walk to the bus stop, it's just so good for you. And we really have forgotten how good for us it is.
Brilliant. Thanks for that, Danny.
Yeah, and really echoing what's already been said, I think this crisis has really put into perspective what is important to our lives and how we should spend our resources and time. And I think, you know, out of adversity, I think a lot of people have developed some really new positive habits and routines that I'm hoping will kind of stick. And one of those has certainly been that newfound appreciation of our natural surroundings. And for me, if we can learn, you know, how can we use this as an opportunity to really embed this for future students. And you know, like I say, with this particular topic in mind, I'm really keen to explore how stargazing and how we can utilize the night and the long winters. As I've already said, it's a real theme for my students that they really suffer over this time. You know, how we can maybe use that to develop some kind of a coping strategy which might benefit much more people than currently know. You know, it's a bit like an inside secret. You guys are aware of this, and it's how do we get that across so that more people can enjoy and benefit from it.
Brilliant. Thanks for that. So I think we've managed to capture a really good sort of summary of what we might have learned and the kind of impact the sky has had, and how COVID has changed that as well in this session. Brilliant. Thank you very much. So if I may try to summarize that. So in a way, for me, sort of the takeaway point of today was that actually the kind of the situation of COVID has managed to, in a way, force us to sort of be more together, this togetherness as well, and also has given us this time and opportunity to be together with relatives in a slightly different way than we would have done before. And it has, in a way, forced us to go out more as well and become far more aware of what is out there in all its different facets. We were talking about seeing that there's far more nature out there, hearing the bird song, seeing things that we haven't noticed before, and then in some way going away and trying to research what that might be. That was really fascinating, and especially Sky gave us then that idea that we were forced out to do that, but also forced out of our usual bubble, and that's the kind of thing, getting out of the usual treadmill, and that's getting into this fresh perspective and sort of airing the mind and becoming open and mindfulness in this way, which was really, really beautifully expressed in many of the examples that you brought forward. for example, the walk, the mindfulness walk, which was then reflected in some ways in which you engage with the sky as well. And Jackie represented some steps in which you can sort of view the sky, switch off, become aware of the situation, the cold, and what is around there, as a way of getting this mindfulness, this state of openness and calmness in a way. And the interesting thing that I thought was in there is the aspect of uncertainty, or the unknown, which was on there. In the usual treadmill of our everyday life, that becomes really a source of anxiety. But actually going out there, seeing it in the sky, I think was described in many terms there as well, is there, but it's actually causing a calmness and a way of where we feel grounded and part of a bigger picture, and becoming less stressed about what's going on. And it's really fascinating to see, as you were describing all your different viewpoints, that the perspective is actually what is really interesting here as well to see. So I think all of you reflected that the main important thing is we should take these lessons on board and not forget about that, not forget that nature is out there, not forget that the sky is out there, and continue with this. Thank you very much, everyone. That was a joy to see you all, and I hope I'll have a chance to chat to you further on as well. And Jackie, you mentioned your piece that you put together as well, and it will be brilliant if you could put the link on the line as well in the feed later on as well for some of our participants to look at else. Thank you very much, and I hope you have a good night, everyone. Thank you.
Super, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks everyone for joining in on the chat and following our discussion. So brilliant that Ian mentioned already how clear the night is, and that we really need to maybe pop outside, as Pauline says, and just embrace the backyard as a beautiful urban observatory just outside of your door. And our acting observatory support officer Dan Turner is now here to tell us a little bit more about how to do that and what's up in the sky for us to see there.
I'm Daniel Turner, and I will be taking you through what's visible, what's worth observing in the sky at night in the coming month. Let's begin. Start with the planets and the constellations. First up is the planets. We've got Mercury, which is at the moment up during the day and is also occupying roughly the same sort of altitude as the Sun in the sky. So as a result of this, it's not easily visible, possibly not visible at all. Venus is very visible. It's rising in the east-northeast in the very early morning. It's sort of passing backwards through Leo during the month, and on the 3rd of October it will sort of eclipse Regulus, the major star of Leo. Yeah, it's pretty obvious, pretty bright. It's really nice. I took a picture of it this morning myself. Not very good, but still it's there. Mars rising in the east at sunset, visible all night long in the constellation Pisces, and in opposition on October 13th. More of that later. Jupiter and Saturn this past month have been really interesting to watch, really cool. They're slowly moving together. They're fairly low in the south in the early evening, but due to the fact that Saturn has been in its retrograde loop, and it's coming to the end of that and will start going back the other way, or the right way as it were, is going to look like it's standing still on September 29th, and because it's slowing down and it will be moving slowly away, Jupiter is moving towards it, and later on in the year they'll conjoin. There will be a close passing of the two. I'm mentioning Uranus. It's in opposition also on October the 31st. This means that it's opposite the Sun, so it's on the same side of the Sun as we are. So it's like a full moon, but obviously Uranus. Not visible to most people. If you've got a really good telescope, you might see it. It's a pale blue dot, so from one pale blue dot to another. Anyway, thought I'd mention it. So, on to the constellations. We're going to start with Taurus, usually associated with spring, but it's up and visible all night long at the moment. I like Taurus because it's quite easily seen. I mean, if you look towards the east early evening, you'll see it rising. You've got Aldebaran there, which is a very bright star, which is on the face of the bull, and you've got the horns of the bull, and also on the face of the bull you've got the Hyades, which is an open star cluster, and on the flank of the bull you've got the Pleiades, which is again an open star cluster. And the Hyades is nearer than the Pleiades, but it is a fair bit older. It's about 625 million years old, but it is the nearest open star cluster, only 153 light years away. But both of the star clusters are really interesting, really useful, because they can teach us a lot about stellar evolution, because all the stars within the clusters are sort of created at roughly the same time. And so we can learn about, as I say, stellar evolution and the relationships between age, mass and brightness, which is a really useful thing to understanding our own sun. So from Taurus, we sort of skip quite nicely to Aries. As you can see, you've got the Pleiades there. If you follow the Pleiades up, you can come to Aries here. You've got the 4 stars that make up the asterism of Aries, and the brightest star being Hamel, which isn't named after Mark Hamill. It's meaning lamb in Arabic. Approximately 4,000 years ago, so about 2000 to 1000 BC, Hamel would have been located at the verne, the spring equinox, which marks the beginning of spring, and I think this is why, and it's posited why Aries is linked with the ram, and they use the name Hamel, lamb, because spring is obviously associated with lambs and such. There's interestingly in Aries there's several interacting galaxies that are sort of so close to one another that they're stripping each other apart, and so it's quite an interesting and active region for deep sky as well. But I mean, you need, you know, powerful instruments to see this sort of thing. But with the naked eye, it's quite an easy asterism to find, and from there you can leap up to the next constellation we're looking at, which is Triangulum. And as you can see, you've got Aries at the bottom here, and if you just go upwards, you've got the triangle of Triangulum. It's made from 3 stars. Interestingly, the brightest star is actually the beta star. Usually it's the alpha star, but in this instance it's Mizan, and it's Triangulum beta, which interested me. I didn't quite know why, but there it is. It's home to the Triangulum galaxy, which is a local galaxy to us. It's in the local group, and it's the 3rd largest in the local group, being about 30,000 light years across. So it's about 1 arc degree on the sky as we see it, on its major axis. It's about 2.7 million light years away, so I mean it takes 2.7 million years for light to reach us from it. So it's, despite it being a part of the local group, I mean it is pretty far away. The local group having a radius that I read somewhere of about 5 million light years across, and the local group contains over 30 galaxies. So I mean it's not a huge amount, but you know, there's a lot going on in there. It's as I say, the 3rd largest in the local group, the 2nd largest being the Milky Way, which is about 50-ish thousand light years across. So we're fairly, as a galaxy, fairly larger, but not as large as the next galaxy that I'll talk about, which is in the next constellation, which is Andromeda, which again is a short sort of jump from Triangulum. I'll just point out that that's where the Triangulum galaxy is M33, just off the point of the Triangulum asterism, and just up from there you've got Andromeda with the 3 stars here, and if you look up from the second, there's a kind of an arm, and just off the top of that you've got Andromeda Galaxy M31, which is the largest of the local group of galaxies, and it's only 2.5 million light years across, distant from us, sorry. And it has an apparent size of 3 degrees of arc, so that's 1 degree of arc for 2.7 million light years away, 3 degrees of arc for 2.5 million light years away. It kind of points to the fact that it is way larger. It's much, much larger, and it's over twice as large as the Milky Way at about 110,000 light years across. And interestingly, it's got 2 smaller satellite galaxies, M32 and M110, just in there, if you can get a decent look. This is visible with the naked eye. M33 is sometimes in very good conditions visible-ish with the naked eye, but certainly M31 is. I've seen it. You have to kind of look and use your peripheral vision, look to the side of it, but you can see it's a nice smudge on the sky. Yeah. And notable event for this coming month is going back to the planets, basically, is Mars in opposition, and which is going to occur on the 13th of October. But because it's in its almost closest orbit to Earth, which is at the moment it's 38.57 million miles away, and I think at the closest it's about 33 or 34 million miles away, so it's not far from its nearest it can be. It's opposite the Sun, obviously, so it's like a full Mars as opposed to a full moon, and it's going to have a magnitude of -2.6 and be 3 times brighter than Sirius, and only dimmer than Venus or the Moon in the night sky. So it's really worth looking at, really worth trying to get hold of some binoculars at least to get a really good look at it, see if you can see some features on its surface. And that's it. So thank you very much for listening, and if you've got any questions, please post them in the chat, and either myself or Dan will be able to answer.
Thank you very much for that, Dan. So I can only underline that it's so fascinating to see Mars. I've just put it into the chat as well. That's the best opportunity to see it, definitely for quite a while before we come around for the next closer opposition. And it's so much better now than it was nearly 2 years ago when that was the case. So it's a really, really, really good opportunity to go out, and given the good weather, have a go, and it's really good. And I can see Ian has posted something else called opposition. What's that then? So in a sense, when you've got 2 planets like Earth and now Mars orbiting around the Sun, there will be times when they are closest together to each other. So they are sort of forming a line, Sun, Earth, Mars. Obviously not exactly aligned, but they're sort of in line. That means at that point they're closest. If you think about winding time on, then Mars and the Earth move further away from each other, so they're closest. If they're perfectly circular, then that would always be the same distance. But because Mars is not massively, but still noticeably an ellipse, so a bit of an oval, depending when they come together, so where this opposition happens, can happen when Mars is furthest or closest to the Sun. So in this case, with the last one and this one, Mars is closest to the Sun. With us there, gives us that closest distance. Last time was closer, but this time is only marginally further away, but Mars is much higher in the sky. So opposition essentially is when you can imagine when Earth is in between the planet of question, Mars and the Sun, so forming a nice line, and we are closest to them. Observationally, that means Mars is up high in the sky, due south, middle of the night. So at around about 1 o'clock ish, Mars will be beautifully high up south in the sky to be seen. And Jupiter and Saturn are now slowly but surely setting, and Mars is taking over the reign. So that's enough for today, I would say. I would definitely say that's enough for this, and many thanks to everyone, to all the panel members, to everyone who's participated on the chat or in any other formal manner. A big shout out again to Dan Turner supporting this as Observatory Support Officer, and the IOP helping to support and run this as well. Else, I would say have a good evening, enjoy the night sky, enjoy your backyard, and fantastic stargazing, and try to sort of lose yourself in the sky. Good night.